I've been navigating the deepest waters of the financial world for more than 30 years, not just in theory, but in practice. I made realistic decisions at the table, managed real money, stood right at the center of real crises. I was always there when markets were sinking, when currencies were disappearing, when wars were tearing economies apart, when pandemics were bringing stock exchanges to their knees. I carried the weight of trillions of dollars of responsibility. And the most important lesson I learned throughout this process is not at all what you would expect. Because after so many long years, so many crises, so much reality, you come to understand that the essential question is not, how do you get rich? The real question is this: what are the assets that will never leave you destitute under any circumstances? To reach the answer to this question, many investors look in the wrong places. They follow hot market trends, chase the next big opportunity, hang on to the tips given at midnight on finance channels. I will talk to you about a different approach. I will speak about 5 asset classes grounded in historical evidence spanning centuries, in economic principles that have retained their validity from crisis to crisis, and in what the world's most sophisticated institutional investors have been quietly doing for years. These assets are not magic formulas that will make you a millionaire overnight. They are not speculative. These are building blocks that represent real and tangible value, that exist independently of government policies, currency fluctuations, and the mood of markets, and that have formed the foundation of wealth throughout human civilization. If you are ready, let us begin. The first asset that will not lose value regardless of the time period we are in is physical gold held directly in your own hands. I know that in today's digital age, gold sounds old-fashioned. Perhaps you think this way too. When there is crypto, when there are ETFs, when there are tech stocks, why would we bother with gold? But there is something I have noticed. This pattern of thinking leads to the same place every time: disappointment. In contrast, over the last decade, the world's largest central banks, the most powerful sovereign wealth funds, the most established family offices, have been buying gold at record levels. These institutions are not speculators. These people are not chasing trends. These are the true architects of global finance, and each of them generally does the same thing. They accumulate physical gold. Why? Because these people clearly know that gold is not an investment instrument. It is an insurance policy against the collapse of everything else. Take a look at a history spanning more than 5,000 years. The Roman Empire fell, gold remained. The Spanish peso collapsed, gold remained. The Weimar Republic was buried in hyperinflation. Paper money turned to ash. But gold not only preserved its value, it became the sole valid medium of exchange. So why is it more critical today? Because what we are living through today is the greatest monetary experiment in human history. Every major government in the world is running budget deficits at record levels. Central banks are printing money at rates never seen before. The global financial system is operating with the highest leverage ratios in its history. When confidence in paper currencies is shaken in such an environment, where do people flee? To gold. But pay attention, not to gold ETFs, not to gold mining companies, and certainly not to futures contracts, because behind each of these lie complex and unresolvable financial structures, and these are structures that can collapse. Physical gold, on the other hand, exists in your hands, in your safe, in your real world. It does not rely on any intermediary. It is not bound to any bank commitment. In the 2008 crisis, while banks were sinking and stock exchanges were being pulled down, physical gold recorded a value increase exceeding 25%. In the 2020 pandemic, when the entire world sank into uncertainty, gold reached its highest level of all time. I recommend keeping 5 to 10% of your total assets in physical gold. This is not a growth investment. This is a protective shield, the thing you still have in your hands when everything goes wrong. The second asset that will never lose value is productive agricultural land together with water rights. Stop and think for a moment. People always have to eat. This will never change. The global population is growing, urbanization is accelerating, and climate change is fundamentally transforming agricultural production conditions. When you put this equation together, the result is very clear. Agricultural land that is fertile and provides access to water is becoming an increasingly scarce scarce and therefore increasingly valuable asset. Throughout my financial career, I have systematically observed agricultural land values. The long-term trend is unambiguously one-directional, but pay attention, not every piece of agricultural land possesses this value-preserving characteristic. Truly valuable agricultural land that will not depreciate has three essential features: fertile soil, structure, favorable climate conditions, and reliable water access. Land meeting these three criteria has shown a stable appreciation over more than a century, independent of economic conditions. Think of the Great Depression. Stock markets experienced losses of nearly 90%. Banks closed one by one. But prime agricultural lands preserved their value and were able to continue producing crop revenues. During the stagflation period of the 1970s, when inflation was ravaging the economy, agricultural land was one of the best performing asset classes. Because when food prices rose, the value produced by these lands also went up. Today, the picture is far more critical. The world's population is projected to reach 10 billion by 2050, and to feed this population, food production needs to increase by more than 70%. At the same time, urbanization continues to rapidly shrink the area of agricultural lands. In this framework, water rights occupy a separate and far more critical place. It is observed that many major underground water reserves globally are under consumption pressure exceeding their natural replenishment capacity. Agricultural land with water rights will multiply in value as water scarcity becomes more pronounced. There are already countries and institutions that have understood this. From China to Saudi Arabia, many sovereign funds have been buying agricultural land at a global scale for years to secure their food supplies. For individual investors, direct access to this asset class involves structural limitations due to high initial capital requirements and the need for expertise. However, agriculture-focused investment funds open a more accessible door to exposure to this asset class. The key determining factor is entering through that door. The third asset that will sustain its long-term value position is infrastructure and public utility companies that have a monopoly-like position and are indispensable to the fundamental functioning of the economy. Can you sustain your life without electricity? What would happen if your access to water were suddenly cut off? Can you continue to exist in the modern economy without an internet connection? The answers to these questions are more than clear, and this clarity makes the value of the infrastructure assets providing these services permanent. During periods of economic contraction, people cut back on restaurant reservations, vacation plans, and spending on luxury consumption. But they cannot stop paying their electricity bill. They cannot stop using water. This structural demand inelasticity, meaning the continuation of demand regardless of price and conditions, makes these assets extremely defensive. Moreover, the businesses providing these services generally operate in a natural monopoly position or under regulatory protection. The limited entry of new competitors into the market allows these businesses to possess long-term and sustainable pricing power. This means the power to determine prices and preserve margins over the long term. Even during inflationary periods, these companies can generally multiply their tariffs and sustain their profit margins. Looking from a future perspective, the most exciting dimension of this picture is the infrastructure of the digital economy. Data centers, fiber optic networks, base station towers, and cloud computing infrastructure are now becoming as essential as electricity and water. In a world where demand for data transmission and storage is multiplying, businesses that own this physical infrastructure possess enormous pricing power. These infrastructure assets require high capital, go through regulatory approval processes, and once established, generate predictable and stable cash flows for decades. This category is an indispensable part of a long-term wealth preservation portfolio. The fourth asset category that will never lose value consists of shares of businesses producing essential consumer goods with strong brand loyalty and sustainable pricing power. Not all shares are equal. Repeat this sentence and engrave it deep in your mind. The stock market as a whole can be volatile and unpredictable, but certain businesses, the right businesses, have proven time and again the capacity to preserve and grow their value under almost every economic condition. These businesses produce the things individuals buy in good times and bad: medicines, food, cleaning products, personal care products. Demand for these products does not diminish with a contraction period. It does not change with the unemployment rate. These are things that must be consumed for the continuation of life. There are 5 fundamental characteristics that distinguish these companies from similar ones. Essential consumer products, possessing strong and established brand value, a broad and global distribution network, pricing power above inflation, and consistent dividend payments. The combination of these qualities forms a profile known among major investors as widows and orphan stocks. Such companies can be considered safe long-term assets even for the most conservative investor profiles. Focus on companies with lasting competitive advantages and genuine economic moats in investment decisions. An economic moat is the structural advantage that allows a company to sustain high profit margins by protecting it from competition. This moat can manifest in the form of brand loyalty, regulatory approval requirements, network effects, or cost advantages. During the 2008 financial crisis, risky and speculative assets experienced value losses from 50 to 90%. In contrast, established companies with strong brand positions producing essential consumer goods weathered this storm almost unscathed. In fact, some of them multiplied their value as investors moved towards safe havens. These companies have a track record of uninterrupted dividend growth spanning 20, 30, even over 50 years. This is not just a return, it is historical proof of reliability. However, I need to emphasize the critical distinction here. Widely popular products and those of an economically essential nature are not the same thing. Tech giants' products are in high demand, but in periods of economic contraction, these can be deferred. Upgrading a smartphone is not a necessity. Medicine, food, detergent, on the other hand, are indispensable products. Direct this distinction toward your investment decisions. The 5th and final asset that will never lose value is real estate in prime locations with limited supply and strong demographic dynamics. I need to quickly issue a warning at this point. Considered as a general asset class, real estate can contain speculative elements and carry risk. However, certain types of real estate in specific locations have proven their capacity to preserve value throughout every economic cycle across the long pages of history. The key words are location, scarcity, and demand dynamics. Prime residential real estate in major metropolitan centers with strong labor markets, established educational institutions, and where new construction remains limited due to geographical or regulatory constraints, has shown stable appreciation for over a century. Temporary corrections have occurred, they always do. But despite this temporary volatility, the long-term trend has not changed. The real estate with the highest capacity to preserve its value in this way share 3 common characteristics. The first is an irreplaceable location advantage. For example, ocean frontage cannot be created anymore. Regions close to major universities or critical economic centers cannot be replicated. The second is limited supply. Even when demand fluctuations occur in markets where new construction is not possible, scarcity forms a supportive floor for values. The third is durable and strong fundamental demand for the relevant asset. Demographic growth, economic dynamism, and cultural centers of attraction generate sustainable demand. Accessing this category individually may require a high level of capital and accumulated knowledge. However, well-managed real estate investment trusts holding strategically located properties open a more accessible door to this asset class. At this point, I want you to take a step back and grasp why these 5 asset classes are fundamentally different from others. The common characteristics of these assets are not coincidental. Each one represents real and tangible value, not financial claims. Gold is a physical element. Agricultural lands directly produce food. Public utilities meet continuous and indispensable needs. Essential consumer companies provide the products necessary for daily life to continue. Real estate offers shelter and usable space. The value of these assets exists without depending on what the market thinks. Each one feeds on scarcity. There is a certain amount of gold in the world, that is all. Fertile agricultural land cannot be expanded. Critical infrastructure systems cannot easily be multiplied. The supply of real estate in prime locations is limited. Scarcity creates value and prevents dilution over time. Each one benefits from growing demand over the long term. Population growth increases demand for food, shelter, and consumer goods. Economic development expands demand for infrastructure and public services. Urbanization feeds demand for prime real estate. These are structural trends that continue independently of short-term economic fluctuations, and each one has a proven history across multiple economic cycles: wars, depressions, hyperinflation, deflation, pandemics. Every major economic crisis in recorded history has tested these assets, and all of them preserved or increased their value. Finally, all of them continue to generate income or use value even during the waiting period. Agricultural land provides crop returns. Public utilities and essential consumer companies pay dividends. Real estate generates rental income. You are not just waiting in expectation of value appreciation. You continue to earn throughout the period you wait. The key to bringing this strategy to life is not focusing on a single asset class, but spreading across all 5 categories in a balanced manner. As a practical framework, keeping approximately 10% of your total assets in physical gold, 15% in agricultural land and investment instruments in this field, 25% in public utility and infrastructure companies, 30% in essential consumer goods businesses, and 20% in real estate in prime locations or real estate investment trusts offers a solid starting point. This distribution ensures you are exposed to different value preservation mechanisms while keeping the risk of any one asset class underperforming under control. It also needs to be stated clearly. These assets were not designed to provide maximum returns in the short term, especially in bull markets. Growth stocks may leave these assets significantly behind. This should not trouble you, because the goal here is to preserve and grow wealth steadily over decades. And at that horizon, the stability offered by these 5 asset classes cannot be compared to any other approach. The essence of the most intelligent financial management is not always to maximize returns. Most of the time, it is to minimize permanent loss. Do you know what happens when you build a portfolio shaped around this principle? You can sleep peacefully, independent of the daily noise of financial markets, because the foundation of your wealth has not been shaped by news, central bank announcements, or market sentiment. It is based on real and tangible value, on assets that have stood for centuries. The world we live in today harbors the highest risks in history toward paper currencies, financial systems, and economic stability. These 5 asset classes are the most reliable shield against these risks. They will not grow your wealth overnight, but they will ensure you preserve it no matter what happens. And all those who are truly wealthy know that the most valuable thing is not losing what they have earned. The choice is yours.